We're good? All right. So I'm going to call to order our December ad hoc meeting, ad hoc boundaries meeting. Let's take a quick pulse check of the board members that are in attendance, administration that's in attendance, and then our community members that are in attendance. So start with Vice President Jones.
I'm here. Barely, but I'm here.
She's the hot, and on the cold section is Board Member Bolton.
You got it. Eve Bolton, board member.
And then let's start with our administration, their team, and then we're going to just introduce the community members that are in the room. So we've got our superintendent.
Ira Wright, Superintendent, Cincinnati Public Schools. I did invite today our Senior Director of Instructional Equity, Dr. Sarah Tierney, who did a lot of work behind the program audit. I will also add that she is a Walnut Hills grad, recruited back to the district. So I thought I would just share that. I'm going to do better in making sure that we are bringing in our team members so we know who the new faces are. So she's a senior director, and I think everybody knows Jeremy.
That's the man with the maps. The man with the maps. So let's keep going.
And Dan. Hi, friends.
So Dan is our counsel for those that are tuning in. He's kind of old hat at every meeting, poor baby. So we just forget about him. But sorry about that, Dan. So, and then we have our board admin and our tech person. And then now we've got some community members who joined us today. So let's start on this side and go around.
Tammy Hoffman, I am an LSDMC parent rep at Pleasant Ridge Montessori.
And Sharon Cheney, I'm the LSDMC PRM rep and chair at the Golf Manor Community Camp here.
Oh, okay. So we need you to get on a mic because they can't hear you. Jeremy, can we take this mic and give that to you too? I'm sorry about that. So just come to the mic so we can hear you.
Tammy Hoffman, I'm a parent LSDMC rep for Pleasant Ridge Montessori.
Hi, Sharon Cheney, Golf Manor rep for PRM LSDMC.
Thank you.
My name is Erin Fay, and I am a mom of an 8th grader at Walnut Hills, and I'm also a Walnut Hills graduate, 1996.
Oh, you have to push the button because they're now on and off.
Oh, I thought it was.
It wasn't like that before, but now we're updating.
Okay. My name is Erin Fay, and I am a parent of an 8th grader at Walnut Hills and a Walnut Hills graduate.
I'm Allison Goodman. I have two students in the three. I have 3 children in the district, 2 at Pleasant Ridge Montessori and 1 at SCPA.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Kyle Reiser. I'm a member of the LSDMC at Rohill Elementary and a member of the East Westwood Improvement Association.
Over. No, I was going to get turned on.
Jeez. Carol Gibbs, I'm chair of the LSDMC at Taft Elementary, and on the Community Council in Mount Auburn, president of the CDC in Mount Auburn, a graduate of Woodward. And
do we dare ask the year?
No, we do not ask the year. And I have 2 children who graduated from the system.
Thank you so much, everyone. We've got PRM represented, lots of Eagles in the house, and we've got Roll Hill, Taft Elementary. It's a great meeting. Roll Hill.
Oh, okay.
So let's dive into it because we've got some great stuff coming up today. We are going to hear a big chunk of our presentation today is from the superintendent, the district administration regarding the school audit. So I'm going to turn it over to Superintendent Wright and her team. I'm not exactly sure which one you want to do first. It's just the one presentation, right?
That's right.
We got to. Okay. Mm-hmm. So let's get our presentation up. Community members that are online, if you do happen to have any questions, please raise your hand in the Blue Jeans app, and then we will take them as they come in. Sometimes it's a little difficult to raise your hand and then wait for 20 minutes. So we will raise your hand, and then Rob will address it. For the ones that are in the room, if you do have questions, if you just wouldn't mind letting us know, and then we'll take them as they come in real time as well. I'll take a regular one. Well,
Okay.
if they,
You printed it. It's this one right here.
okay.
You want one? You want one?
If, only if we don't have enough. If
Well,
we have,
didn't
if we have
print a
enough,
lot, so we probably don't
it's okay.
have enough. We can illuminate it though. All right. Good afternoon, everyone. I am Jeremy. If you want to pass this down for me. So the information that we're reviewing right now has been shared with the board and is likely on board docs. We took the information from the program audit and just made that into a presentation, a PowerPoint, so it would be a little bit easier for us to go through. So first I want to start just by sharing that this has been our work. It started in about October 27th through November the 18th. So through that time period, in terms of just process, every school in the district was visited in terms of specifically looking at the school program. The rubric that was used, what I just shared with everyone, the boards, many of the board members copied out the rubric that was in the attachments that they received. This is also online because it was one of the documents that was shared. So if you have access online, you're welcome to use that as well. But this document is a document that's used really to begin to look at what you see in terms of programming and how that program looks and shows up in a school building. I would like to add, as we get started, that this is really important for CPS because CPS actually started magnet programs in 1973. The former superintendent of Cincinnati Public Schools became the founder of Magnet Schools of America. And I don't know collectively how many people knew that, but that is amazing because this particular rubric that we're using is adapted from the rubric that is used through Magnet Schools of America to really determine the level of implementation as we begin to look at programming. So specialized programming in our district has been around for over 50 years. Our programs they remain a tremendous asset to be utilized to achieve positive outcomes for all of our students. This equity audit has outlined several areas for growth and opportunities to take action as we think about where we go next. And we also pulled out information that was really specific to thinking through the goals of the ad hoc committee and how we might be able to make some considerations as a result of that. So the overall executive summary, we evaluated the current state of specialized programming, including all of our schools. So that was our magnet schools, Vision 2020, our CTE programs, college and career courses, gifted services, so forth and so on. What we found is this report indicates the need for bold action in order for us to best prepare our students for the future. Establish program standards at each school, expand access and achievement within college and career readiness courses and gifted services, and rebrand schools to better match the current needs and strengths of the schools that we're serving. We can go to the next. So the method that I shared the program evaluation tool that was used. We looked at 4 specific areas in every school based on the rubric that was shared with you. The leadership component will be addressed in the next round of reviews. This one was specific to vision, culture, classroom practices, and equity in terms of those 4 areas. So essentially, as you think about it, as you're visiting schools, visiting classrooms, looking at programs and course offerings, is the vision there for what the program says that they have? And are you also able to see that in terms of classroom practices and procedures? So that's the best way to kind of think through that. The tool itself was modified from across continuums through Magnet Schools of America and a couple of other larger school districts that really have some forward-facing programs as well. And this is just a snapshot for everyone of what the documents look like. This specific one is on the document for classroom practices. And so just to give an idea of the setup, the board members have the Excel, which we'll also share as well. But knowledge building would be a number 1 in terms of thinking about the way that it was coded on the Excel. And the exceeding vision would be number 4 in terms of thinking about it. So if we're looking specifically at the learning environment, there wasn't visible evidence of the program theme that exists in classrooms or in common areas. So that's where we start. And then we end with classrooms not only reflect the presence of the program, but are organized to continue that program. And I do want to offer kudos to our team. So the instructional equity team includes everyone that is working through all of the programs outside of core. So when we think about core, we're thinking about English, math, science, and social studies. This includes everybody else. So these individuals went into schools, visited classrooms, had conversation with leadership as we begin to think about the work that we're doing. So I do offer kudos to the team in terms of that work. What do we find at a high level? So a few things that we found that we thought would be very specific to some of the conversations that we've had through ad hoc is this list of schools they have one program by name in terms of thinking about the magnets. There's one program by name, but they're implementing a different program in the school building. So that would be the first thing. Just with these particular ones. So you see the name of the program and then what they're actually doing. I think the one that caused some question here, Covedale, is the name of the program is Community Leadership Academy. The actual program is Leader in Me. While it still speaks leadership, Leader in Me as a program is a very branded program, and we have several of the schools in the district that are also using that program. So while it's still leadership, not specifically the Community Leadership Academy, as you would think about what that would be. Hyde Park has their initial program as a part of their Vision 2020 was personalized learning, and they're really making the transition to project-based learning instead, which is another STEM that's used across the district. Kilgore was 21st Century. They're making the transition actually to STEM. Riverview East was the only school that was identified right now that does not have a program, that doesn't have a program at all. So there's not one specifically that's identified. Roselawn shows arts and sciences, but that's a program that would really need a lot of additional support there. And then Silverton has been digital leadership in terms of Vision 2020, and they're actually doing the implementation for Leader in Me. The other findings is lack of access to accelerated program across schools, and this is specifically talking about honors programming, acceleration programming, AP, and gifted. CTE program offerings that are desirable and lead to certification. So while there is opportunity for all of the schools to have a CTE program, we're finding that it doesn't lead to the students actually getting a certification or a certification that becomes useful for them. Additional need, of course, for professional development to improve program integration. And we know we have more schools on the East than West, so therefore we have more programs on the East than we do the West. So as we go through each of the programs relatively quickly for the board members, this should probably be right on about slide number 4, I believe. And I won't go through all of these, but I do. Are you all able to find it? I see you all looking for it. Are you able to find?
No, but
no.
I will find it. I have it. I have it pulled up, but
Findings was a little like that.
I moved them to the top.
Yeah, I got
But
you.
now we're on slide 13.
Okay.
The board members.
Access to college and career preparation. Key findings here is that we offer AP coursework across the district. The district has done a great job of making sure that there is a way for students to get access to AP courses. What we find is that across the board, there is low participation and there are limited programs, limited AP courses outside of Walnut Hills that students can actually take. College preparatory, and the breakdown here is from the Excel that you have. These are the bars that go along with that Excel. So it just puts it in a picture format for you instead of just the numbers. The last bar represents the current star in terms of achievement for those particular schools.
So for college preparatory, there's just a lot of work for us to do around the entire acceleration space and what acceleration looks like. So there's one thing to offer the courses. There's something else for the students to actually pass the courses in terms of pass rate and accessibility to those courses. And the same would be true for CTE programs. We are offering CTE programs. There is a strand that's being offered across the high schools in terms of CTE. However, we need to really work on an increase in the students getting the actual certifications that go along with those programs, and also realigning what some of those CTE programs are so that we're truly preparing students for the jobs that are current and jobs that they would be looking to go into once they graduate.
Sure. Superintendent Wright, because I'm one of those people that forget my questions, so I have to ask them. I'm getting a little older. So if we go back to slide 13, when it says college prep, can you go back for me? Is that just a curriculum that is college preparatory, or is that CPP courses?
So this is actually schools that have as their theme college preparatory.
Okay.
So in looking at the schools that have that in their theme, and there at this point there were predominantly some of the high schools. There were we named them before in one of the meetings as well, and I can pull them up on the document. But we had, for the elementary schools, there was conversation earlier that, and I want to say that Board Member Bolton shared with us, maybe it happened 2 or 3 years ago, that we really shouldn't identify as a track or as a theme college preparatory. All schools should be college preparatory, but that is still in our themes, and it was still a part of the magnets. Now, at the end, in terms of a part of the lottery process. Now, at the end, we'll talk a little bit more about that because we believe that we've cleaned that for this year.
Okay.
But that is what this is based on right now.
Okay.
Okay.
I just wanted to clarify.
Okay.
Thank you.
The same is career and technical. Evanston is listed here because Evanston actually has a program that's considered career and technical. They are looking to, as in the elementary environment, but they are looking to change their program. So they're looking for a different program for the school. The next is access to gifted services. And so this is still all under acceleration. The one thing, and there's more specificity in the actual written document around each of these areas that might give more information, but want to call up a few things here in terms of gifted services. So gifted services are not recognized by the state if support is not provided equitably across at the school and across the district. So essentially, we have schools that have students we have schools that are serving students in a gifted program, but if it's not happening across the school, if they don't have access across the district, then they can't get credit for that when it comes to the Ohio report card. So that's relevant because we found a way to expand AP coursework at the district level by having a set of AP teachers that go to high schools and provide services to students in high schools. That's how we've increased AP. We really have to think about how we look at students, how we're identifying students, how we're then providing those services to them and organizing such that we're really able to attract students that are in gifted programming in the services that we're providing. We have specialists right now that go into the schools and work with students and teachers, and they support an additional specialist support with student identification. So access to gifted and talented. So these would be our schools right now that are identified or have an identified program for gifted and talented. Interestingly enough, Cheviot right now has, of their population, Cheviot's overarching program is Leader in Me, really. And they are considered a model school by the Leader in Me organization as a Leader in Me school. Now, it's called something specific. I have it written here, but they're considered a model school, one of their flagship schools. But we have Cheviot as a gift, with a gifted population. Only 8% of the students at Cheviot are actually in a gifted program. So when we think collectively about resources, about time, about services, only 8% of the students are currently in a program where they would be getting any type of services.
They're not a magnet, though.
Cheviot, they service the gifted students. So they have a magnet program for gifted students. So students that are gifted right now in terms of options, so to speak, would be sent to Cheviot if they want that kind of programming.
But there's only 8%.
8% of their student population.
Okay.
Yes.
It's a neighborhood school with a program because there was no gifted opportunity on the west side.
I thought that's how
And
it
so
was.
really what probably should along the way happen is an association with Spencer, so that you have Spencer on the east and you have Spencer on the west, so that that's one thought. It's been very important for Cheviot's effort to have that program available on the west side, for West Siders.
So-
But you're right, it's a program within a school. It's
Correct.
not really the school.
Correct. And so we have some recommendations in the end, but and that I know that'll open up a lot of conversation. Is this beneficial? Is this what we're needing at this point in terms of moving through? Okay, great. Okay, then we go to arts and culture, and we have all of our. Rob, is there a way to move the little update? Okay, you have to restart.
Go ahead.
Okay, I can keep going. All right. So key finding in arts. Key finding in arts and culture is there truly is the need for arts integration training to align the arts with the core curriculum. If we can exit so we can see the other bars? I think we can do the X. Let you hide it for a minute.
Get the flavors of Jeremy. So.
Jeremy. I can't see behind the bar.
Well, what we could do is what we could do is kind of.
I have it.
There we go. Okay, good.
That's what I was trying to. Okay.
Oh, Lord.
Okay. If you go back one, Rob, for me. He said we have too many things we're trying to do. Oh, we're going the other way. There you are. Okay.
There we go.
All right. So as we think about arts and culture, one of the things that we notice is that there is really an opportunity for us to continue to augment our programs in terms of arts and what we're doing with the program. So the second bar in is SCPA, just so that we have perspective for what it is that we're looking at. The first is Chase, and then we have Frederick Douglass, which is the third. South Avondale, we'll talk about a bit more in just a moment, and then we have Woodford Academy. So that just so that you'll see the schools that we're referencing here. But we know, and we would expect that in terms of SCPA and what you're seeing there in terms of the rubric is going to be a bit different than some of the other schools. However, if arts and culture is the focus, we want to make sure that we're being as robust as we can in that space. And there's a lot that we can do there. I'm really excited to talk about it. Environmental studies. We have several of our schools that are environmental studies, align programming to standards for instruction, looking at possible expansion of Future Farmers of America. That's something that we saw as something that we could really work through, and continued connections to agriculture and nature organizations to really make sure that we are working through the program. So when we get to the spreadsheet, it's in a format that we'll be able to sort it for you. Many of you are looking at it already, but sort that spreadsheet so it'll give it to you in one view. Rob, we can go to the next. Expeditionary learning. Expeditionary learning currently is in 4 of our schools, and it covers primarily it becomes the ELA program that the schools are using. It is a whole school program because a part of that focus in terms of culture as well is a focus on what's called CREW, and CREW is all about social emotional learning, how the schools are coming together, what the kind of work that they're doing in the school building. It is very well aligned to the standards, just like Wit and Wisdom is aligned to the standards. I think one of the spaces that we've already seen, we knew this already, we really have to do some more work with Reese Price because we're not sure that this is the best program right now for Reese Price. It is very teacher intensive for what needs to happen in the building. And so Wit and Wisdom might give the teachers more support in terms of being able to work with students that we're really working to get to grade level standards. So that's in walking the school building already last year and this year, that's conversation that the principal and I've already had. It was something that she shared, but currently it is one of the 4 schools. And I think you can see along the continuum kind of where the differences are. So she's really excited about making a transition, but expeditionary learning is one of the programs that we're using. And of course, we have our Montessori programs. 1 in 6 students in CPS attend Montessori programming. Our curriculum adoption will be complete by the spring in terms of our Montessori programming. And we are in different places in terms of rebuilding in some of those areas. But in terms of the areas of focus, we're seeing across the board in terms of integration and how it's integrated in the school. Obviously, we have schools that we believe not only just to be accredited, but their model status in terms of the work that we're doing in Montessori. There are some rebuilding spaces. North Avondale is one of those where we're really doing some rebuilding work. There's a lot that needs to go into really thinking through that, and we're beginning to work with the principal there. And there's additional work for us to continue to support Gamble, which is a bit of the environment is just a little bit different in terms of thinking about where we are, but there is a work to be done there also. Project-based learning. I see we didn't update the D, so we do project-based. That should be a D on the end. There's an opportunity to expand. The schools that are working with project-based learning are really excited about doing that. Hyde Park, as I shared before, was doing personalized learning instead, so they're just getting started in the project-based learning space. And so there's more work for us to do there. And strengthen student interaction with the community through real world expectations and real world applications. That's a huge part of the project-based learning continuum. We have STEM and STEAM across the board, benefit from defined focus within STEM and STEAM. And again, looking at the partnerships that we're able to have with our schools as a part of that. What we notice is a Kilgore, which is the 4th one in. You see the yellow bar that goes all the way up because in academics they're a 5-star, but they're just getting started really in the STEM space. STEAM, we know as the A for the arts, but they're really beginning to do some work there. And so across the board, there's really more work for us to do to really, there's a lot that can happen through STEM. And identifying separately STEAM because STEAM brings in the arts component. Technology-related programming. So we're coming up to opportunities at the end. Some conversation around changes for Ethel Taylor to do more integration with technology. Technology as a standalone is something that we discussed, and I think we talked about it here as well in ad hoc. All of our schools have access to technology. So if the goal is actually to recruit students or to make sure that students are getting a unique experience, everybody is getting access to technology. So really beginning to rethink what, if that is still the right area to look at, and if not, what replaces that. And in most instances, it becomes STEM because the technology itself all of our students have access to it. World languages, curriculum adoption is on target this year for world languages. It's scheduled, I think, to come to the board in January or February for this year. So working through identifying resources. One of the challenges that we have in world languages, which will actually also shows up in our in how we're beginning to think about our recruitment and retention plan, but it's vacant positions. So in many of our schools, LEAP being one of those, we have the world languages positions available, but we don't have the staff for the world languages. And it's also the same as we think about the needs of serving our ELL population. It's not just the dual language, but it's also having staff members that are certified in those areas. IB, we're just getting started with IB, and we're moving along really well in terms of the IB. We have Roberts and Dater in terms of IB, and so we do believe that we will work through really quickly to make sure that the schools are certified because they've gone through their first phases. Their first phases went really well, and so the next phase is for them to move into certification. All right, now we get to considerations. As we think about considerations, and this one is a little more expanded so that there would be an opportunity for more dialogue. So there are three main targeted areas that we think about right now that we thought would be important to have conversation with in this room in terms of considerations based on the data that we have. One, expansion of accelerated programming in schools across the district. Schroeder established an early college program that offers a degree option program. So all of our students have access to CCP courses at their schools. The recent focus for the district has been let the students get enough credits to get them 12 hours, which gets them through their first semester. However, there are amazing opportunities for students to really get their AA degree before they graduate. And so starting that in one of our schools would also offer opportunity for students to get an AA, start the work early, so that by the time they graduate, a degree. Around that were John P. Parker. We know that in the area around John P. Parker, there are changes in the community, and how do we really look at addressing some of the changes that we see in the community through programming at the school. So John P. Parker has a well-established environmental studies program. Adding an additional theme of that, the college prep has been removed from the school, and adding a pre-early college focus as a feeder for Schroeder. To think about, as you're thinking about connections, could other students from other schools still go to the early college program if they were accepted to that program? Yes, but it would give an opportunity to really build some continuum and alignment between John P. Parker and Schroeder. The other is in terms of consideration, and this may be one that nobody likes. So it's just one to just think about as we're looking at where we go next. In terms of consideration for Spencer, thoughts around whether or not we rethink Spencer as a 312 school and think of Spencer as a K-6 program. That would then allow us to move the program from Cheviot, and I heard why we have the program at Cheviot, but that 8% of the students there are in the gifted program. So really doing rebranding around Spencer as a K-6 environment, and then identifying an additional high school space for gifted programming. One of the things that we have really seen as a challenge in talking at the school and visiting the school, and we know that it's a new program, but the facility being able to do things like expand a science classroom so that you're able to get the hard sciences that students need that would allow them to be competitive with Walnut Hills. The location makes it prohibitive in order to do that. So if not, I think we would then be looking at space, like where would be the next best space for Spencer to be so that it really can attract students that are in that gifted and talented space and want that experience. So that's one consideration, one set of considerations. The next set of considerations is we have talked through these sessions as well about 7 and 8, and I think that the ad hoc committees was designed with the focus of elementary, but it's hard to talk about elementary without talking about high school to some degree as well. And we talked about the 7th and 8th grade in high schools. And so when we go to our presentation and look at the capacity, the Ethel Taylor, Douglas, and South Avondale are all at less than 50% capacity at the schools. I think one is around 44%, the other is around 48%. And even with the programming that's already there. So yes, there's additional work that needs to happen in terms of augmenting the program, but this could be an opportunity to create K-8 spaces at those 3 buildings so that the students are in the space, they stay there just like we do, at AWL. The students stay there until it's time for them to go to high school. Now, we have not done the next level of that to say, okay, where does high school, but in terms of just thinking about how we begin to address some of the concerns of 7th and 8th grade students in the high school space, while we're also looking at utilization of those school environments, that could be something to consider. And then the last consideration there, we'll go all the way to the last.
Sorry, friends.
The create program standards action plan.
Correct. So the one back for me. Remove, so update school boundaries for the change programs, and that would be removing the magnet boundaries from Silverton, Mount Washington, and Coaldale. We've actually moved forward with that, so that's actually done in this iteration of what we're doing with magnets. As we know, the students, of course, are grandfathered in, but it doesn't put additional students that are in the magnets, the magnet boundary process. In this area as well, the other Woodford is the other school. If you go to the next slide for me, Rob. This is the last one. This is the same information that you have, board members, in the Excel, but I did it in the color because that's how I actually look at it, because it allows me to look at it by program. So what you see here is in the area of classroom practices, these are the schools that across the district in classroom practices, their rating was 1. So essentially what that's saying is there is work for us to do to determine, 1, whether or not that's the right program for the school. 2, whether or not there needs to be transition. And then 3, how we begin to start that work. In terms of anomalies, what we see is in the area of vision and culture. So for vision, for some of the schools, you see they have the desire, they have the vision to do it, but when you go to the classroom, you don't see any evidence in terms of classroom practice. So that could be a professional development process. It could be just really aligning whether or not we're looking at those, how we're looking at those programs. I call out Woodford specifically. They're on this list as well. Roberts and Woodford don't have an attendance boundary. So when we think about our other schools, they have some form of attendance boundary. For example, Silverton has an attendance boundary. Woodford and Roberts do not have an attendance. And so while we are addressing Roberts right now through IB and really moving through the PYP program at Roberts and the beginning of the MYP program at Roberts, when we think about Woodford, we really have to give some more thought to what kind of programming goes to Woodford. Because right now, all of the schools around Woodford, there is a boundary for them. So I don't know that it's just a matter of creating a boundary for Woodford. It has a district-wide magnet boundary, but if without that, there is not we need to look at programs and program augmentation. So this goes through all of this information. If you'll pull up, Rob, the Excel, or would you have it as the same Excel as well? Many of you printed that out also. This one is just color coded, so it's the same exact information that you have. And it breaks down in terms of East and West, each of the categories that we're looking at. If you'll go to the end, Rob, and then the current enrollment and the percent to capacity. So as we're talking about those schools that were pulled out and recommendations, it really was based on that capacity. So I'll stop there so I can open up for any questions that we have, and we may, if we need to toggle back and forth between the two.
Okay, so that's a lot. It's a little heavy. It's a little heavy right now. So we're gonna write. We don't have that presentation that you gave us, all those considerations. So if you wouldn't mind, our version of that.
Okay.
You just wouldn't mind sending that.
No, that'd be great.
Okay, that would be great.
Was it just the considerations or the only thing?
Slides that are different, and like the considerations, my number 3 is not what was there.
Okay.
So it's probably just an updated version.
I'm gonna say my comment last, refer to the historians of the committee. If you've been around at our ad hoc meetings, you know I'm in between 2 big old history books. So I'm going to start with either of them. So which one would like to start? Oh my goodness.
No, well, I'll start. I don't know that I have questions at the moment. I've been taking notes and writing down some things that kind of hit me. And again, I'm one of those people who has to take time to really process the data so that I can formulate this question. There's some things about what I heard you say that I really like conceptually. I like that expansion of K-8 notion. What I don't have a sense of, and maybe that's somewhere in this presentation, is what the district looks like. What the district looks like in terms of demographics and how that itself is going to create some additional kinds of concerns and considerations. So I like the idea about the K-8, and then what does that mean? You mentioned specifically about Spencer, and and maybe Eve can respond to this, but when Spencer was developed with that concept of building on till the 12th grade, it was because to help us deal with some of the, what I call overflow, or to balance out some admission to Walnut. Is that correct?
Mm-hmm.
And so I would need to know more. For me, I would want to know more about what that would look like. And then, I'll say this in a different way. There are students at Walnut who, for whatever reason, even though they pass the test, they don't necessarily do as well, or may need something different. And Spencer has always sort of been that go-to. And so I have questions about that. But again, it is heavy. The information, there's lots of data in here, and I haven't had a chance to kind of digest it all. But those are just an example of some of the things that I have questions about. The one big one for me is around the demographics. And there's nothing on here like that. I see the information on enrollment, but that doesn't tell me anything about demographics, where people are and what that would look like. And maybe that's somewhere down the road.
Do you mean in terms of the profiles that we presented before for the schools, like if those recommendations happen,
yes,
what the new demographics
yes,
would look like?
Yes. But I think where I'm going with this is I don't want us making changes that would create even more segregation and and movement, because I do believe that one of the issues around what we're talking about has to do with transportation, how far people have to go to get to the school. And I agree with you that whatever changes occur is going to influence high schools. So it is the big picture kinds of things, but I'll shut up because I'm not making sense anymore. But
no, I do understand exactly what you're saying.
Okay.
I want to remind our community members that they can raise their hand, and I want to also remind our friends online that they can submit questions in the chat, and Rob is getting that. Or if you prefer to ask your question directly, you can. I will share, before I know Board Member Bolton is about to come in, my lightning bolt here. I'm interested in intersections. So I think this is a great foundation. I'm very intentionally concerned about tracking and segregation of our students being in tracks. Like when you mentioned J.P. Parker being a feeder for Schroeder, I just want to make sure that if students are aligned on a specific track, that they don't get stuck in that track. So that's a concern for me. But I'm also interested in why are some of our families choosing the schools that they're choosing? Why are they passing 4 schools to go to a different school? That to me is very concerning, because we had a visitor, Dr. Rhodes, share that we need to also be looking at why is it that people are making choices to go to avoid certain schools and then go to other schools. And then additionally, when we have a school, I'll say like Pleasant Hill, where 2 kids can live on the same street, just blocks apart, some have to be bused to Mount Airy, and then others get to go to Pleasant Hill. So, I mean, those are the things that I don't think it's just as concrete as this is what the numbers are and let's make decisions on those numbers. I think that there are other things that are impacting these numbers. And the historical perspective of Spencer is concerning to me, because it took a while to get to Spencer. Like, it took a while to open up Hyde Park. It took a while to get Spencer there. And I cannot ignore that all of that hard work was there for a reason. So it may look a specific way now, and the recommendation may be based on this here and now, but the community was very conscious about wanting to preserve something. And so I think that's just, those are just like my cursory thoughts, but I'm going to defer to Board Member Bolton at the moment.
I'm thrilled with the whole thing. I don't agree with half of it, but I'm thrilled with the whole thing. I mean, and to the public's point of view, everybody has to be reassured that since we're operating in a transparent way, you're going to watch the sausage get made. And so this right now, there are phone calls happening, there's texting happening from at least, I would say, maybe 6 school communities. And so be it, because this is one of the reasons this person is here, is for us to be able to get to that next level. So don't anybody freak out yet. It looks like there's many decisions that have already been made. I think some of them have been made that make sense based upon what we've decided, a couple of years ago or a few years ago. I appreciate the idea that the college preparatory is not a magnet. College preparatory should be offered in every one of our elementary schools. The fact that we don't explains almost everything, because we've made ourselves into a remedial district instead of a school district. So I think that removal of those 3, I think, is great. And other administrations have come up with it, but then didn't do it. This getting it done is so I think that's great. And that was Coverdale, and that was Silverton. It's Coverdale and
J.P. Parker.
Mount Washington, J.P. Parker. Yeah. So that's the first thing. And I think people need to know that all these schools that have been discussed are not magnets, folks.
Right.
Most of the schools we've just discussed are our neighborhood schools. And what's happening is that we are reviewing the authenticity of the Vision 2020, which has been in place for several years. We did it in order to bump up our neighborhood schools and increase the instruction that would be there, or the attractiveness of it. And so this is crucial to make sure people know. Actually, we have fewer and fewer magnets than we did 15 years ago. But this is and I think it's important that we want Vision 2020 to be so important to the instruction, and it needs to be authentic. So I'm liking this. I'm still a social studies person, and I'm still thinking geographically. So I think there is interest in the community, and certainly on this committee, to find more ways to get more of our kids into a middle school concept, or more 7th and 8th grades. I worry about concentrating it in the schools that we have rather than looking at what we have geographically. Our language schools, our international schools are K-8, I think. AWL and AMI and Roberts, I think they are. But also you have Sailor Park because of its location. You have Hartwell Carthage, largely because there's another reason that happened. That's in the central quarter. Sailor Park obviously is, somewhere close to Denver. I would say that as a Sailor Park person originally, but what we don't have is a K-8 on the east side, and I think that I've said this before. I think the nominee there is probably J.P. Parker, because on the east side we also have so few preschool seats, and that has been an issue. But I like the K-8. I like the authenticity of this. I like what we just did about college prep, and this will sound too radical, but I think STEM and STEAM and technology and arts integration should be in every single school.
Yes.
So it's a comprehensive school. Those aren't those just like college prep. It should be a special program. It should be an offering. And I think if our families knew that everyone, like 1,000 years ago, she only went about 500 years ago to CPS. I went 1,000 years ago. Everyone, I was talking about Carolyn, but now I'll include you and give you a worse number. But
I do have things I could throw at you.
But I do think that if people knew that our neighborhood schools were comprehensive schools and
Yeah.
had a full-fledged program,
That captures it all
I
for
think that
me.
would make a big difference. But I am thrilled that this is now on the table.
Mm-hmm.
I do worry, just the little history of Spencer. We were identifying our gifted and
Yes,
near gifted
that's
kids,
right.
and it was racial,
Yes.
it was social, it was awful. And so there's a couple reasons Spencer was created.
Yeah.
One was because we found we were doing that. And so Spencer kind of became a place for that, because whatever. And to Carolyn's point, it was also because so many of our teenagers that go to Walnut, actually Walnut doesn't fit them.
Right.
But they don't have
An option.
an interest or other option, at least that they saw. So I would worry about dismantling Spencer. And then from a community, I don't think it should start at third grade or what. I think it should have started at fourth grade. But that is higher than I can ever decide anything. But I do think that we have to be careful about not having something on the west side. We have been busing or by streetcars, an elderly gentleman told me, our west side kids that are particularly scholarly. We were putting them on the traction line and sending them to the east. And the west side knows that. And actually the Spencer Gifted program, just like everything else, I don't think we've ever really sold it on the west side like we should. Mm-hmm. We've always kind of given short shrift to the west side, I think. But I'm worried about anything about that. But I'm glad it's on the table.
Mm-hmm. And
I hope people don't freak out. Instead, they are excited that we're sharing and we're trying to do the right thing together. Mm-hmm. So I'd love to have this as an open discussion, the next time we meet or whatever, so we can all think about it. But I feel strongly still. I'm sorry, I'm still in the bus thing and access stuff and knowing we can't do high schools of choice across the universe eventually. So I'm thinking in terms of what do we have on the east side, what do we have on the west side, what do we have in that central border? Because the city is 3 pieces. It's not an east-west city. It really is that. But I'm thrilled with taking this stand.
So I'm going to have our superintendent respond, and then we're going to start taking some comments from our people in the room. And Rob, do we have anybody on? Okay.
So I think the first thing that I would like to do is reiterate that this is just the beginning of conversation. I would agree, and I think that I know that me and the board, we've talked about this before, but I not only would agree, but my past experience speaks to the need for this type of programming across schools. Art programs in every school, the opportunity to take accelerated coursework in every school. But when we are looking at how we are taking where we are and then beginning to make recommendations for how we further improve where we are, it allows us to start the conversation. So in terms of and that's why actually it was listed as considerations and not recommendations, because I really don't want us to walk away from this conversation saying, did you know that they're getting ready to do X? Okay, right. There is no getting ready to do X. This is the baseline for us to have conversation. And I've even shared with our ad hoc committee is that I am hopeful. I will share this information with the entire board, but I'm also hopeful that we can do this in one of our CAL sessions where we have all of the board members and we're able to present all of the information just around programming offerings and then juxtapose that with recommendations that we're making moving into next year in terms of how we're thinking about how we're offering services to students. So that's number one. In terms of Spencer, and I think that it's and I understand how we got to where we are with Spencer and why. I do think that from visiting the school, from talking with the staff, from follow-up with the principal, if we don't do anything differently at Spencer, we need to look at the facility.
Yes.
Because high school students they don't have a gym, and so while they have a program, there's more that we're going to need to do as a district to get the school at the level that it needs to be so they truly can. Maybe compete is not the best word, but so that you get more families that find that as a space. And in terms of coursework, there is some coursework right now because there is not the build out for lab space in the school. There's some coursework, advanced level science coursework, that you can't offer, at the building right now. And so that's something that we just really have to think about and think through now. I've worked in environments where we go in and we knock out walls and we make classrooms bigger, and that is something that we can do. But we have to just make sure that that is the direction that we're looking to go, and that is the best direction for that environment. In terms of any of the other suggestions or considerations, they're just that. It's just really starting the conversation around how we look at next. Yeah, I concur that there is the board has heard me say this often from just beginning to begin the work around high school transformation. Some of that work has to be with the 7th and 8th grade students that are already there. But if there are opportunities for us to remove some of the 7th and 8th grade students from the high school environment, whether that is in a K-8 space or whether that is in a junior high space, then we go back to space. Like, okay, this is great. Now, we decide which schools do we not have, so that we have a space for 7-8, because that would be just the next consideration, but open to having a discussion. And I think that, there are opportunities on both sides.
Well, I just want to repeat again for those that are in the bleachers. These are considerations. We've made no decisions. This is an opportunity for you to get involved. If you're on the phone texting your neighbor, tell them they're talking about having you come to a meeting so that you can join us and give your input. So please don't start picketing us and sending us nasty messages. You're going to close Spencer. That is not what we said. No. So,
Dr. Moffett, can I add one more thing as well? The other piece of this that is in the report that I didn't call out here is where we see next steps. And all of this, the Excel, the rubric, principals were aware and involved in this from the very beginning. But where we see next step is having small group sessions with principals, starting with the group that had the ones, right, in the classroom practices, so that there can be input from them, from their schools around what is the right fit program. If this is it, okay, great. Now we need to look at what we need to do to make sure the program is at the level that it needs to be for the students. If this is not it, what are your students calling for? What is the most appropriate for the environment? So the next thing is really to begin some of those deep conversations with principals around what's next. So I did want to add that as well, so that we know that it's continuing that work in progress.
I completely agree. I think it's principals and community members. So call your local LSDMC chairs and tell them to come to these meetings as well, because while the administration is opening it up to the principals, community is already around the table. So give your input as well there too. Board Member Bolton, and then we're going to go to Carol and some other community members I think had some questions.
I would just two areas. One, the Woodford piece, that neighborhood is committed to arts, and they have the wonderful arts center and whatever. And so that's why they kind of chose the arts and culture piece. But as a neighborhood, that is generally Kennedy Heights. And Kennedy Heights lost their school when we did the facilities master plan. And there was, so it would seem to me that as a neighborhood, maybe that can return to a neighborhood school, which would help fill that void. I will also say that when we agreed with the board to go ahead with expansion at PRM, it was determined that because of its success and because of the ownership that the neighborhood had for PRM, nobody was changing anybody's boundaries for PRM.
Right. That's right.
If I recall, we said we'll build on rather than boundaries, and whether or not that's working out or not. But that was just the other one about the school is that over there on J.P. Parker, with all the things that are happening in Madisonville, I think K-8 works there, and that's another reason why we bought the Lighthouse School and refurbished it, to think of it, that it could be part of the expansion of J.P. Parker to the PK, and the littlest people would be over in that littler building.
Yeah.
And then J.P. Parker. So I think Lighthouse figures in this too, the sheer expense and the number of kids and whatever, and whether or not that's the best place to have Lighthouse, which we're proud to have. But I mean, those would be, that Kennedy Heights piece was a sore for a lot of folks, and then I think the J.P. Parker piece. Am I remembering that?
That's correct.
With the building.
Yep.
That was. We'll be quiet.
So, no, she won't. That's not true. So I'm going to go to Carol. I think she had a comment, but I also am going to implore Rob, feel free to turn up the heat a little bit. I'm a little cold. It's a little windy in here. It's my personal preference. I'm cold. Go ahead, Carol.
If anybody wants to know what year Miss Bolton graduated from high school, just let me know.
1969. Oh. Thank you very much.
1970 Hughes High School. Now it's your turn.
So two things. One,
She never answered. Okay.
was 1966. We had, I don't know about this year, but in years past, we've had a higher population of children at Taft Elementary, which is STEM, from Price Hill. The charter school, which sits about 20 feet from our school, almost is all western side of town. And one of the problems we had with magnet schools back in the 70s and 80s was that parents who had their children in programming that they liked, and this is just an example, in Mount Washington and lived in Sailor Park, couldn't get to schools. So there was no parent involvement in those situations. So one of the things we really need to look at is parent involvement, and can parents get to their children's school? Because that is, in my opinion, that's one of the things that we're kind of deficit in.
Anyone else have a question or comment? Rob, anybody online?
Might
Good sign.
I add to that as well? Go ahead. I'm sorry.
I'm glad you mentioned that last piece about supports for the principal superintendent. I'm curious, and I know nothing's formal yet, but will those kinds of supports be open to the LSDMC? Any kind of prep work and discussion around the fidelity of the program and changes that are going to be made in the future, especially for those lower ranking schools?
I would say yes, because first, if there is any expectation for change, knowing that the LSDMCs were intimately involved in what programs were going into the schools and giving feedback to that, the goal would be for the same thing to happen. And so I think it's first starting with identifying the fact that this is what is current, right? This is what we're currently seeing. And this is the measure by which we're looking to move forward to, and really having some of those questions or those conversations around what is the right fit? What is the most important in the environment? And how do we get to that space? So I think my initial conversation honestly starts with the principal. And then the principal goes back to the school and has the conversation with the LSDMC, has the conversation with the staff. But it's really getting input. For some of the schools, it's, in walking schools and visiting with principals, you get information from the other end. So to your point about Taft, for example, you have the school that they opened up right behind them. They lost the students that are still lost from Taft in that example are 64 students that never did come back. And many of those students transitioned during the pandemic, and they were not able to re-recruit them back to the school after that. And so, in thinking about that, what is the most appropriate program at this point? How do we augment the program that's already there as the something that brings people back? So yes to your question, but I did want to address that piece as well. And I think the one more piece to your point, Ms. Gibbs, is in visiting high schools, just in a high school on yesterday. And I know this isn't a high school conversation, but just in a high school on yesterday, where the principal shared with me that daily I have 200 students that are late to school. Not because of transportation, not because of the bus. Parents drop them off, they don't come in, or they get up late, and by the time they get there, and left that principal walk down the hall to talk to the school social worker because we're talking about how we're addressing those students. And she asked the same exact question, and it was, are we really thinking about neighborhood high schools? And so one of the things that we also want to bring back, and I've had this conversation with the team, it will likely take us until, February to get this. So I know when I say it, we're going to, it'll probably be February, especially with the break. But it's looking at the number of high school age children around what would be considered our neighborhood high schools. Like, I know we don't have them now, but if we think about it, how many 7th through 12th grade students or rising through 7th through 12th grade students are in those spaces, so that it becomes something that we're looking at in terms of numbers as well.
And
Yes, ma'am.
I happen to believe that that we can. I agree with what you said in terms of, well, I know this is not a high school conversation, but everything that we do here is going to impact that. And if I recall, one of the original tasks around this was to really look at boundary issues and the efficiency or lack thereof of transportation and comprehensive programs. So it is, to me, it's a bigger picture. Now, specifically, we may look at the changes in phases or whatever, but ultimately this conversation is going to impact our high schools. If I'm not, I think I'm correct in saying that. And so I think it's good for us to begin to have those dialogues right now. So
I want to call on Ms. Gibbs.
We have been having our district-wide LSTMC meetings on Google, which has been bad. It keeps a lot of people from getting in, huh? I've got it on. So my suggestion would be that we have a district-wide LSTMC in person and that you guys lead it through this conversation. And I bet you get good attendance.
I'm writing that down. And I also want to say, in response to students in neighborhoods, we've had, on our very first meeting, we had some community members that came in to advocate for neighborhood schools back in the day, neighborhood schools. And one thing that, and I don't have a preference one way or the other, but I am concerned because what we don't include in that conversation is that our student populations in general and across the nation really are transient. And so we can go make a district decision to go back to neighborhood schools, but kids tips on average, many of them have more than one high school per their career. So, and that's not their fault. They have to move with their parents and with their families. So it's a larger conversation when you talk about homelessness of kids or even socioeconomics. Kids are part of families that move and that, right. So we also have to be cognizant of the fact that we may make decisions based on what we think is the case, but then also society is changing as well. So that's just something I want to interject in there. Does anyone else have any other questions around what we've heard?
This is good.
I think this is great discussion. I think, in all honesty, I think this is a great foundation. I think there are so many layers that should be involved in the input for a multitude of reasons, but primarily for transparency and communication and letting the community know that we're listening. These are our suggestions, but where do they see us as far as going? People that have younger elementary students will be in the district, hopefully, for years. So they will see the implementation of what we're proposing. And they are also the ones that will tell their friends, hey, you should come back to the district if you're not here because they're doing some great things. And so that's ultimately one of the things that I look for is we don't have to sell it. If it's great and we build it, they will come, I think. So if there are no more questions on these, did you want to say something before we move on? Well, the next thing on the agenda, because we are not where we've got a lot, and we know that we are not going to get through it. It's 5:12. The next thing on the agenda is where are the magnets and Montessori schools pulling from? Jeremy, does that get into maps?
Yes.
Okay, well then we're going to move on to Jeremy.
Pretty quickly, what you received was a supplemental package to what the superintendent presented that answers some of those more direct questions that in map form, right? So we didn't get into TAPS as much. There was some question around it in our last discussion, looking at TAPS and its comparison from a neighborhood to a magnet program. So there is a map in there that has some additional information broke down for where the current student population is coming from for TAPS, just for consideration and perspective. But more importantly, regarding for the elementary or the Montessori schools, on the second and third maps.
Can we pull it up, Jeremy? Can we pull it up on the screen?
Sure. Miles enough, we should be okay.
Okay. You guys are going to love these maps. It did get a little warmer in here. Thank you, Rob. I don't know, but it feels warmer. Maybe it's my coat.
Again, the first map it shows that Taft Elementary does in fact have a neighborhood or an attendance boundary identified in the blue outline like we've seen before. The walking boundary is the green outline. We're trying to be fairly consistent across our maps, so that's always the case. But you can see that from our profile that we looked at once before, about 34% of the school population is coming from within their attendance boundary, where 66% or so is coming from outside currently. So that goes back to the superintendent's point during the discussion of part of we have to look to see if there are programmatic ways to draw those students back in if we were to be talking about a neighborhood school versus eliminating their magnet status. Because right now their population is pulling from citywide.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Second one is a look at our Montessori system as a whole. This is a breakdown of all of the elementary Montessori schools, so you can see color-coded legends in the lower left-hand corner where the populations for each of those schools is coming from. And you see a pretty clear distinction between the regionality of those schools. But it makes a nice image there.
It took a long time.
It did.
It took more than a decade.
No, he just.
Oh, that's okay.
The next one is up with, again, kind of outside of our normal conversations, but wanted to look at the Montessori High School between Clark and Gamble to show the distinction there where their populations come from. You can see blue being Gamble on the west side has a much stronger population coming from the west side, whereas Clark is much more spread across the entire district as opposed to just being the east side as its normal designation. Next, we look at and actually I have LEAP on the wrong map, so just note that LEAP is on the non-language one, accidentally. Okay. But in looking at the magnet elementary, basically segmented into two kind of maps that we can look at in two groups. Removing the ones we've talked about previously, J.P. Parker, Silverton, Mount Washington, and those, so that they're kind of out of the picture and we can look at the remainder. This one being the non-language schools, which includes our gifted programs currently from Spencer and Cheviot, and allowed us to see basically where those programs are pulling their current populations from.
But Cheviot wasn't a magnet.
Cheviot is a magnet for its gifted program in those specific grades from 3 to 6.
What? Now I'm really confused.
Sorry, I know.
We asked a question earlier and it said it was a neighborhood school that had a gifted component. But the gifted component is magnet.
It's what we would describe, or what, across education we describe as a program within a program. Mm-hmm. So they have their regular boundary, but then they have a specialized program within the school as well, which is the gifted program that currently has 8% of their population.
Clarifying question. So these dots are just representative of the 8%, or those dots representative of the whole school?
No, those are representative of the whole school, the entire student population. And then finally, we have the language schools from Fairview, AME, AWL. I will correct this and put LEAP over onto this one. So again, we can have that systematic or the system view that we've talked about for the Montessori system and the magnet systems as a whole.
Roberts?
No, again, we removed Roberts and Woodford, both of those, since they do have the district-wide. They're not part of these collections. They were in ones that we've looked at previously. In like the last presentation, both of those were on a different one that was there.
Yes, ma'am.
Is AWL and AMI not citywide?
They are.
So all of our language schools, or international schools, as I prefer to call them,
Correct.
are all citywide draws. Which makes
That's
sense for the international population being so distributed. Maybe even by nationality, it's kind of interesting. That okay, thank you. And they're K-8.
Correct.
That's right.
Okay.
To add context one more time, it's the Cheviot. I know that question keeps coming up. So that equates to 44 students. So just so that we're knowing the number of students that we're talking about, Cheviot has 500. Their enrollment is 51. So that's 44 students.
Was that it?
Yeah.
Oh,
Any other
okay.
questions regarding the maps?
Yeah, I don't have any questions. I don't have this can I get this electronically?
Certainly. Yeah.
Okay.
We didn't get
I thought we sent it out.
I didn't.
Let me double check.
It's
Is it on
on
Board Docs?
Was it just added or something? I didn't see it. Okay, thank you.
Okay. Does anyone have any questions from the community online? Anything? Okay. Look at us. We are cooking with grease, I tell you. So district map with 1 mile walking distance for neighborhood schools.
Again, that one's pretty simple.
Those are in the building.
We have both of those printed as large as possible, as was requested. On both sides of the room, there is a slight difference between the two. This one, I think, was a little clearer to see what we were looking for in terms of the overlapping of the walking boundaries. So this gives you a picture of just the walking boundaries. On the far side of the room behind Mr. Hoying, you'll see the map. It's the same map, same walking boundaries, but it also has the neighborhood boundary overlay on it as well. So it's a little bit harder to see the breakdown, but it gives you a better visibility as to where the geographic location of each one is at.
I definitely think the board should see this one. These two.
So Taft Elementary is just Mount Auburn.
So this is the walking boundary. So this designates a 1 mile boundary around the school itself that students walk to the school or are eligible to it and not eligible for bus transportation. It is not representative of the actual boundary for the school's attendance or the neighborhood.
Great, from a transportation standpoint, if we were able to reestablish at some point in time safety within that 1 mile to the walking.
Oh yeah.
That would be great to build.
That's coming to be determined later because this is our foundation layer. So we'll just keep building upon this information. So this is great. Any questions? Yes, ma'am.
A question, just a comment. I've mentioned this to the superintendent. I think everybody in the room knows this too. That in this town, neighborhood boundaries do have credibility and authenticity and are accepted, and even in courts of law. So as we look at fixing some of this, I think that having some sense of matching the school, if it's a neighborhood school, to the neighborhood, I think would really expedite acceptance as this gets more comprehensively established. Because I think that would be really important. There's such an infrastructure around neighborhoods that it'd be great that we could use it and build on it maybe as we go forward.
I think we would also pull in as well to your point about diversity within schools, because that becomes the other piece. There are some neighborhoods that are very, very diverse. There are some neighborhoods that are not. And so I think that as we're thinking through it, we think through as well what kind of additional programming may be in some of those places so that we augment the neighborhood with the program to try to also make sure that we are considering the diversity in the schools.
That's one of the discouraging things. Real quickly is where we do have diversity, our schools often are not. So that's the other piece of the culture.
But the good thing is that we'll know it. We'll be able to see it visually, and we can kind of put it out there. You put the elephant in the room, and then you take small bites. Yes, ma'am.
Just on the note that you just mentioned, I am a real estate agent by career, and there are a lot of differing opinions on the neighborhood boundaries. So, like, I think generally we default to the auditor for the boundaries, but there are also community council boundaries. And there's a street in Pleasant Ridge and Kennedy Heights that is constantly, that Allie lives on, that is a big one on like whose neighborhood are you in, and depending on what you're looking at, it's either neighborhood. So just to kind of always make sure you're clear on the boundaries that you're using to determine the neighborhoods, because they're not consistent across all means. And what some people think they might live in, they don't always live in.
That's a good point.
Or they want to say they live in. Yeah.
We did talk about that at one point. What system?
I think you use community council. I think I asked.
Yes,
Okay.
that's correct.
You use
Currently, we
community
use
council
the community council.
Okay.
Right.
Does that tend to be more consistent? I'm asking. I don't know.
So interestingly enough, I've been a realtor for a long time, and we've never used community council boundaries, but there was a house on her street that, because this conversation comes up a lot about boundary changes, especially for PRM. So people are a little more conscious of like, can I move to Kennedy Heights and have like a 1-year-old and then still be able to go to PRM in 5 years? And, so it just came up recently. So the MLS told us they use community council boundaries. And I think I'm pretty on the pulse of things. And I never even knew that existed, to be honest. So I thought that was interesting, because on the auditor, it says that they live in Pleasant Ridge, which is where I think most of us would default to if you were looking up a house.
Mm-hmm.
But the community council says they live in Kennedy Heights.
Yeah, over the line is constantly trying to steal part of Mount Auburn.
Really?
Oh yeah, I slap their hands all the time.
Yeah,
I know you do. Another thing that is a good point. I don't know, Superintendent Wright, how this will work logistically, but I'll put this out here. I think we should survey some of the families that are at some of these schools and ask them, why are you there? So why do you choose the school that you're choosing? What would make you leave? What makes you stay? Just to get a grip on it. I've heard many times, and you just brought this up, that families are making decisions about schools for reasons that we aren't always aware of. So we're talking about things from our perspective, but if someone specifically says, can I move to a neighborhood because I have a 1-year-old and that means that they're looking at a specific school, why are they not looking at any of our other schools is the thing that I default to. And Superintendent Wright knows, I always look for the other thing. If you tell me something's 80%, I'm looking for the 20% that you're missing. I look for the other. And so that is a question that I would ask. And since I know you have a survey system, maybe we could start with just maybe a pilot of the 10 schools or wherever. I don't know however you want to do it, but I do think we should start collecting the data from LSDMCs and parents and families about why they're choosing their schools to help inform our decisions.
I think that we're starting that with the climate survey. So if we look at the surveys that I gave samples of the actual survey, just a copy of it, just not the one online. But I think the surveys are going to be very telling for us in terms of information around the beginning of that. So for example, in the survey for families, and for my parents in the room, I hope you've taken your survey already. Yes. Okay.
With kids at multiple buildings.
Yeah.
That's something you should do more than one.
Yes.
Okay.
For each of your children. That's why it's open that way and not just for that specific one. But it talks about it gives about teachers, what the involvement is of the school, how often you visited the school, and then it goes into perceptions for the children. What is their feeling of belonging at the school where they are? So I think, how do they feel that they're being prepared in terms of academics? And so it begins to allow us to get a little more deeper. I said that. It allows us to get deeper into really what's happening in that school environment. And so I think the initial survey while I think it'll give us some information to start.
Sure.
The other part of that, though, is trying to make sure that we're encouraging as many families as possible to actually take the survey because it'll give us more global information.
Any questions? All right. So it is 5. Well, my clock just went. It's 5:27 a minute ago. We are not going to get through all of our topics. Is there anything in the next 3 minutes that either committee member wants to? Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
And to us, that our assignment should be that maybe the 3 of us ought to be thinking in terms of starting to draft some kind of summary of where we have some agreement, so that there's something to share with the board. And we start to think in terms of this committee might be sunsetted or extended or whatever, so that they can have some sense besides our minutes. But my that's just a thought I have. It might be 15 things we have agreement about or whatever, or to catch people up on. The other issue is I would like the administration, if possible, to revisit or visit there's children at Winton Hills Academy that are forced by this district to attend Pleasant Hill.
Yeah.
And I have felt strongly for a long time that children shouldn't be specifically bussed out of their neighborhood, away from their families, to be put someplace else. And very frankly, the board has always made the point that you're going to move kids into a particular school. You don't want to move them to a school that has lower ranking or rating or whatever. And Winton Hills does not have a lower ranking than Pleasant Hill. And I think it would be great for parent involvement for that neighborhood. And we went through all of this when we created CANS. We did the community involvement, and people wanted their kids back with them. So I would like that would be an administration, if it's okay with the rest of the committee. I'd like you to look at that so that could start even as early as this new year, not the calendar year, but the
academic year.
Yeah, but I just feel strongly about that.
I support that fully. So I'm in total agreement with that. But the question I had was just trying to recall some of that history. Did it have anything to do with capacity of the building? And so that needs to factor into that. The
CANS piece, it was as we were reshaping, to your point, all these different lines and whatever. And CANS was the model where you put as many of the neighborhoods together, even though there's a lot of confusion about certain lines or whatever.
Right.
So that then changed what happened in the North Central.
Yeah.
It impacted not even Mount Airy and Chase and whatever, but it definitely showed what happened for the Winton Terrace kids and the Winton Finlay community and all that. Those kids were bused too, I believe, going back, actually to create the diversity that people thought wasn't going to be in College Hill. Wasn't that funny? That somehow people didn't see that College Hill is a very diverse neighborhood. So they were purposely bused there. And literally it was called Go Up the Hill, like it was a gift. And instead they had to leave their neighborhood to go to this other school. And they've been wonderful and it's been great, but I really would like to see. And then to your point about the reason it got delayed, even after the administration agreed that needed to happen and the community wanted it, at the time, Winton Hills School had a larger number of kids in it than it does now.
Okay.
And so there was that delay. And once that delay happens, then it dies. So I would just like us to look at that. So these kids aren't getting their bus in front of the school that they could be going to and going to another one up the hill.
Well, I just want to add, it's 5:31, so I want to be respectful of time, but when we first started this work, that was one thing that we talked about definitively, Winton Hills, Pleasant Hill, and it was also Mount Airy. We added Mount Airy to that because we've got kids who live on one side of Hamilton Avenue that are forced to go to Mount Airy. They can look at Pleasant Hill, but they're forced to be bused in Mount Airy, which impacts transportation. So we were looking at, again, here I go, but we were looking at intersections of how many kids are within walking distance of Pleasant Hill, but because of whatever the reason, they're being bused to Mount Airy, and then how many kids live in Winton Terrace but are being bused to Pleasant Hill. And again, that's kind of that climate survey specific to those schools that I'm asking about. So why is it, we should find out from Winton Hill parents, do you like your school? Why are you choosing your school? It's from Pleasant Hill parents. Some parents may tell us, I have to go here. This is the school that they told me. That is not that you want to be at that school. And so you may answer those questions in an affirmative from the survey, but that's not asking you, why are you here? And so that's what I'm getting at, is to the why. Some people, and I know this happens, they specifically want to go to another school, but that's not their neighborhood school. So that answer to that question of that why is different. Yeah, they may love where they are. They may like Mount Airy. So the answers that they're going to provide us are great, but that's not why they chose that school. And so that's what I'm looking for. But I know in response to what you're saying is that we had that conversation. Actually, it was more than one neighborhood. It was Mount Airy, Pleasant Hill, and Winton Hills. But then didn't we also speak about another community that was impacted by?
It even impacts Northside.
Yeah.
But thank you for mentioning College Hill. You cannot tell people they have a neighborhood school and then divide that neighborhood in half based upon a street, which is the district always referred to the College Hill Recreation Center on Belmont Avenue next to Aiken High School. For 3 years, I listened to them talk about a Mount Airy Recreation Center. I said, it was the College Hill Recreation Center that this district thought was in Mount Airy because of the Mount Airy school boundary. And so, thank you for adding College Hill. I was trying to not say anything about College Hill.
But once.
It's very hard for me.
And they both live in College Hill. That's just odd.
Well, my grandkids, my grandkids, if they were to go to the neighborhood school, would be Mount Airy, and I literally can walk 1 block over to College Hill. So that is, and so it's an issue. It's not an issue for me because they just my grandkids. My daughter worries, But I understand the situation. I do. I understand that.
But that's just to put some context to that's why we started talking about this, because we started it in policy.
Yeah.
Because it impacts transportation. I gave the example of how my kids, we live in Avondale. Their neighborhood school was South Avondale, but I chose to send them to Pleasant Hill. We got no bus service to go from neighborhood school to neighborhood school, but we would have gotten bus service to go from my neighborhood to a magnet school, and that's not fair, because if transportation is your issue, you're going to choose a magnet school, not for a magnet school, but because of transportation, because that's where the transportation is provided to, and that's unfair. It's not provided from neighborhood school to neighborhood school, so we are really disenfranchising our neighborhood schools with regard to transportation.
I think the one thing that I will just add to start with is when I look, the first thing that I did with those 3 schools is look at capacity. And so for each of the schools, each of them are hovering between, 75 and 80% capacity. And so I think that we have to add that when we start also looking at those neighborhoods and the streets and where they cut off, because we might unexpectedly create a capacity issue one way or the other, because none of them are at 100%, but all of them are almost at 80%. So I think it's 75 to 80%. So it's something we'll take a deeper look.
We have the wealth of having both a neighborhood school and a magnet school in the same neighborhood. That volume of students would be reviewed based upon what's the capacity at that magnet school and what really is the program that's so special has to be offered. So I mean, because you've got to your point from the very beginning, it is about space.
It is. So we're going to take one more comment from Carol, who looks just disheveled. You all right? She looks mad. Oh, okay. I thought she was going to add a comment in here.
Can we have margaritas here next time? No. Have they ever done anything to try and see why parents aren't choosing Cincinnati Public? And being in community development, I'm watching more and more families with young children moving back into the city. But have we ever done anything to try and find out what they aren't and addressing that?
See, that stuff just excites me. You're speaking my love language, because I want to know what we're missing that they're not, that because they're, and that's why they're not choosing. But you know, this is a foundation. This is a foundation. We just didn't get that far. We are getting that far. I promise we are. So I do want us to be we're gonna have our next meeting, or we can't even plan that right now, can we? For January?
You can target a date.
It will be in January. We won't know about our committees yet because we're gonna start a new
Well,
year.
ad hoc is not a standing committee, so we should still be on. I would not change the composition of this
Well,
group.
then it's a sign.
Well, then there you go. So I think they secretively love and they want to stick with me.
God.
Personally
I wouldn't
speaking.
go that far.
So,
But
so I will say what we decided to do forward for our January meeting was to discuss things in corridors. So is that what we still would like to do? Our corridors would be east, west, and central. And so to our administration, which are we going to talk about first? For them to be, yes, ma'am.
The administration, I just think if they start a discussion about all three, and then we can, I still don't buy that we have to spend 3 months on each corridor. I don't think we have to do that, but I would just, maybe an open discussion and follow up with this, because this is so exciting.
Okay.
And then lead into a corridor piece, and then generally like looking where the schools are and the diversity.
Okay.
I like a previous recommendation about us coming up with some things that we all seem to agree on. And I think the superintendent should be a part of that. We all just need to agree on it. And then I also heard the superintendent say that at some point we're going to report something out, maybe in a CAL for the full board to get their response to
Absolutely.
it.
So let's do this in the best interest of time, because I know we're all ready to go. So we are going to summarize where we are in alignment with the board and the considerations of the administration. If you are a community member, can you send your thoughts, your summations, and what you would like to see to Ms. Phyllis, and then she will make sure that we all get those, and then we will, as a committee, work. We'll draft ours, and then the superintendent will see those, and then we'll come up with something to present at our January meeting with regard to the next meeting being a summation of everything that we see and that we hear, and then we'll take some action from there on which corridors to start with based on summations. Work?
Can we do an overall of 3 corridors and which schools are where? Just
Sure.
that 5 minutes, 10 minutes?
Okay, well, let's wait. Additionally now?
No. And then since we know that the vice president has deemed it okay for us to break protocol and appoint ourselves.
No. It's not breaking protocol.
Okay. So it's maybe with a year or two, they would know.
Since when did they ever do anything, I see.
Could we choose a date in January?
Okay, let's do it, because we have the superintendent here, and that way we don't have to do any email dates. So let's do it. And then we've got our community here. So does Wednesday still work for everyone? We're looking in January. Do we have the dates for Cal in January?
We don't, but I'm going to tell you, January is always a really, really busy month for us. So if we do it, if we could just push it back maybe to the latter
the
part.
25th?
So the 18th.
Yeah.
Okay, so how about the 25th?
Hold on. 20.
That would be the last Wednesday of the month.
What time? I have a conflict. I can't do 4 at all.
Okay, you can do earlier?
I can do earlier during the day. I could do earlier. I just can't do 4.
Is it just that day?
Yes.
Can you do a different day? Can you do a different day? Community, can you do a different day? Okay.
If it's later, the community.
What about a Tuesday? The 25th? I mean, 24th, I'm sorry. No Tuesdays? What about the 23rd? You got to be here. Say again?
We got business.
Oh, okay, we can't do that. Okay, well, what about the...
What about the 26th?
That
Thursday.
Okay.
I can do that.
Yeah, that worked. So 126, Miss Phyllis, at 4 p.m. Is 4 p.m. still work for everyone?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I am too. And bring a friend, or at least tell them to log in. I need some help with these two golden girls over here. Love you. And my three golden girls. Carol, I'm sure she'll be back. Feisty as ever. I love it. So our next meeting is going to be January 26th at 4 p.m., which is a Thursday. And everyone has their assignment. Anyone have anything else? Thank you so much for all that you did. Great foundation for us to springboard off of. And I'm looking forward to our conversation. We are officially adjourned.